Hi, and welcome back to March Madness. Once again, I'm your host, White House columnist for Salon, Brian Karem. Now, in today's episode of March Madness, we're not going to just cheer that Duke lost in the NCAA. Sorry, I'm an ABD man, anybody but Duke. But we are going to talk about the other shoe that fell this weekend, and that is Ronald Reagan. Remember Rasta Ronnie? Ronald Reagan in the 1980 election tried to undermine President Jimmy Carter by going to Europe and trying to convince the Iranians that it was in their best interest to wait and see if he were elected president before letting go of the 52 American hostages held in Iran. This was a huge turning point in the history of our country. It made us look horrible and small and weak. Jimmy Carter had mounted a surprise attempt to rescue the hostage and those hostages, and that surprise attempt unfortunately failed when we couldn't find 5 helicopters that would work in a sandstorm. For years, we tried to live this down. And for years, it was hidden from us that what Ronald Reagan did was pull a little sliver of crap out of the Richard Nixon playbook. Richard Nixon, of course, trying to convince the Vietnamese, the North Vietnamese, that it was better to wait and see if he were president before they negotiated peace. In short, folks, there hasn't been a decent Republican president since Eisenhower. The party of Lincoln and Teddy Roosevelt and Dwight David Eisenhower. No, today it's even though it is part and parcel all about Ronald Reagan. He set the table. Everything about the Republican Party today was given to us by Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan more so because he didn't have to leave the office in disgrace. He had it for two terms and destroyed the America that we all know and love in the process. Healthcare is horrible today. Media is worse today because of what was started with Richard Nixon and especially Ronald Reagan. And guess what? The legacy of Ronald Reagan in 1984, during his reelection, he only picked up 1 seat in the Senate. His legacy, Mitch McConnell. And the irony is, neither one of those two men could be elected today by their bastard political children in the GOP. Ronald Reagan, for those of you who don't know and weren't around, and look, many voters today, if you're 43 years old or younger, you were born after Ronald Reagan came into office. But for those of us who were teens, and my first experience in voting was in the 1980 general election. For those who were around back then, there was a slim window, a small amount of time during which we all thought that maybe things would be okay in this country. We'd gone through the civil rights movement. We'd gone through assassinations. And the assassinations include Bobby, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, those people that were assassinated, and John Kennedy, if you want to go back to 63. After all of that and the Vietnam War and the riots, there was that slim sliver of hope from 1976 through 1980. We all wore the same fat ties. We all had the platform shoes. We all danced to the same music. We all had the psychedelic shirts. Hell, I knew a lot of white kids who had afros. Did you ever see Mike Brady on the Brady Bunch? Anyway, all of that aside, there was a time when we thought things were going to get better, and then we got Ronald Reagan. And things have been worse and progressively worse since then, and there's no way around it. Ronald Reagan set the tone, and everyone after him has delivered on this dystopia. The very first election stolen may have been Nixon stealing his, but now we know by Peter Baker, the New York Times, this article, quoting a former Texas politician who went with him and unbeknownst to him was involved in the efforts to undermine and steal an election in 1980. And I spoke with Michael Zeldin, the federal prosecutor, who was one of those who was on the team who investigated this in the 90s, and they had subpoena power and they didn't know about Barnes. They didn't know about any of this. And at the time, they said there was no evidence that they could find that would support it, but they left open the possibility that indeed it had occurred, and now we know it has. That's the America we live in. That's the America delivered to us by the underhanded cheating of Ronald Reagan, the worst president in my lifetime until George Bush Jr., and now Donald Trump after him. It's been a step down the hill, in fact, a rolling down the hill ever since then. And it's up to us to change it, folks. Hold our politicians accountable. That's what we have to do. Thanks. Peace. Anybody but Duke. Go March Madness. Catch you next time.
The best part of waking up? MAGA tears in my cup. Check out the new MAGA tears mug available now at store.MeidasTouch.com. That's store.MeidasTouch.com. It's 100% union made right here in the USA. I know I'm not tired of winning yet. How about you? Get yours today.